Hi, I'm Cheryl Martin. We women can waste time on what I call the 3 C's: comparing, competing, and coveting. Fixated on what we're not or don't have. Why? All of creation is content to be what it was made to be, except us. So are you ready to break free from the chains of comparison and thrive in your own God-given uniqueness? I show you how in my new book, Distinctly You, Trading Comparison and Competition for Freedom and Fulfillment. In it, I unveil the attitudes that block and the actions that build your distinction. You'll be inspired by my story. I want every woman to be distinct for God's glory. Distinctly You. Available now on Amazon.com and wherever books are sold. God prepared you for a unique purpose, a distinct calling. It's time to become all God meant you to be.
Today on Excellent Living, personal life coach Valorie Burton.
Are we doing the things that really matter, or are we just busy?
This is Excellent Living with your host Cheryl Martin. I'm Doris McMillan. Are you feeling stressed and overworked? Overwhelmed by just thinking about how you're going to get it all done? Well, Cheryl's guest today, life coach and author Valorie Burton, has some answers to those questions. Her latest book is How Did I Get So Busy? There's a lot of ground to cover, so let's get started. Here's Cheryl.
Valorie, most Americans would probably say they are overextended with obligations and commitments. The demands and expectations of life equal stress and constant busyness. There simply aren't enough hours in a day. And so you ask the question in your book title, how did I get so busy? What's the answer? How did we get so busy?
I think a lot of people find themselves asking that question. I think there are 3 reasons that we've gotten very busy. I think the first one a lot of people don't even recognize is fear. Very often we're afraid to say no. We're afraid we're not going to keep up with everyone else. We're afraid we're going to miss out on things. And so we're constantly running, just trying to keep up. I think the other issue that people relate to is technology. Technology has increased so much. And for many people, they simply don't have the rules to deal with it on a personal level. And so it ends up overwhelming them. And although technology can be a great thing and it's supposed to save time, we actually end up just cramming more stuff into less time. And then lastly, I think it's about our values. And I think that too often as Americans, we value doing more than we value being. We value titles and jobs and money more than we value relationships and the things that really matter most.
Well, let's talk about those 3 things. First of all, fear.
Mm-hmm.
How can someone recognize that it's really fear that's fueling their busyness?
Well, I think you have to ask yourself when you start thinking about ways to slow down. When you come up with all of these excuses, and for many people, it's simply, again, the fear that they don't even have the right to say no. Their fear that they're going to disappoint someone. I found in my own life as I really tried to dig deep, and it took me a while, to say, Valorie, why can't you slow down? And I realized that I equated being busy with being significant. And I feared that if I wasn't busy, somehow I wasn't needed, that somehow I wasn't important, I didn't matter as much. And so for me, it was really a spiritual journey because that can be a real stronghold for people. You know, I want to be needed, so I'm going to do everything that people want me to do. And sometimes stuff people don't even want me to do. So I think the fear is something that you have to simply ask, what am I afraid will happen if I slow down? What am I really afraid of here? And for other people, it's something they're trying to prove. And I found in my life, there were times when I was in overdrive because I was trying to prove something to somebody who wasn't even paying any attention. So we have to really get honest with ourselves about what's really driving us.
Because I think here in the Washington area, it's almost a badge of honor for people to say, oh, I am just so busy. Oh, I have so much work to do. You hear that all the time to the extent that if someone doesn't say it, you wonder, well, maybe they're a slough off.
That's right. We're uncomfortable with it. And that's one of the things I talk about in the book. We ask, how are you? And we immediately say, oh, I'm so busy. And what we're really saying is, oh, I'm so important. The world just wouldn't keep going on if I wasn't doing the things that I need to do. And anyone who's ever, just had to sit back for a while, maybe you got sick, maybe you had to deal with something, you realize, my goodness, things still got done, even though I wasn't there to do them. So I do think we wear it like a badge of honor. And we have to begin noticing, are we doing the things that really matter, or are we just busy? I think having a full life is a really good thing, as long as that full life is productive and it's fruitful and you're spending the time with the people who matter to you. But if it's just busyness, if it's just you've said yes, you have too many commitments going on, and you're not able to spend that time with your children, with your family members, doing work that you love, that's meaningful to you, then you've got to ask yourself, what's going on here?
So if a person wants to separate and say, okay, I hear what you're saying. I do want to live a fulfilled life and not just be, quote, busy for the sake of being busy. How do I even begin to sort that out? Give me some steps for helping me determine and just to part the water, so to speak, so I will know the difference and I will begin to live life on this plus side and not the negative side.
Well, I think first and foremost, you have to know that there is a better way. I think as Americans, very often we have led ourselves to believe that we have no choice, that life has to be just a hurried, frantic state, and it doesn't. Sometimes there are just those little things. I think you start with the big things, which is, what are you here for? What's your purpose? How are people's lives better because they cross your path? Each and every day, somebody's life ought to be better because they crossed your path. If you focus first on purpose, then you recognize there are some fruitful things that need to be happening on an everyday basis. I think secondly, you've got to have a clear vision. And, if the person's listening and they're not driving, close your eyes for a minute and really think about, what does your ideal state look like? A state in which you're getting the things done that you need to get done, but you're also able to breathe. I think so many people feel like they just can't take that deep breath. So you've got to be clear about what matters to you. Write that down. And then what is it that you're doing that doesn't matter? And maybe you can't stop doing that today, but maybe you can make a plan that over the next month or over the next year, you begin changing things so that you create space for what you really want and need to have in your life.
Go back to something you said. You said if a person is fruitful, certain things should be happening. What are some of those things?
These are the basics of life. And what I found in the book, I surveyed over 350 people. And I was amazed at some of the things that they said. 55% said it had been over 2 months since they'd had a friend inside their home. Americans are simply not spending time with friends. And in fact, between 1985 and 2005, the number of confidants that people said they have decreased by half. And for that half that they did say they had, they were mostly family members. So we're not building up friendships. So I think that is one of those things that has to be non-negotiable. When we talk about simple things like sleeping, eating. People are skipping meals. People are eating at their desk. We don't sit down for dinner together. Only 28% of American families today sit down, turn off the TV, and have dinner together. And if we think about it, 30 years ago, this isn't something we had to tell people they should do. You just assumed that you sat down and you had dinner with your family. Or even if you're single, that, you might be cooking instead of just eating fast food every day. So I think we have to have those non-negotiables in place, because if we don't, that's when life really tends to get out of control.
You are a proponent of self-care, which is in essence what you've been talking about.
Yeah, I think that self-care is essential, because if we don't take care of ourselves, it's very difficult to take care of everyone and everything else. And we might be able to do it for a while, but eventually we become burned out. And for a lot of people, they become resentful. They become resentful of the people in their lives because they feel like they're giving of themselves and they aren't being replenished. So we have to make sure we're taking care of the body that we have and the mind that we have, and that it's not on the back burner, because it will catch up with you eventually.
How would you define self-care, and what would that look like, let's say, for a stay-at-home or a working mom, let's say, with 3 children? Because I heard a woman say the other day, I always put my children first. I want to be a great mom. I don't have time for myself. So what would self-care look like for that person?
Well, I think first of all, we have to recognize that when you put yourself first, I'm not talking about not taking care of your kids, but I'm talking about having some basics that you do. Then you are better equipped to take care of the children. You are also a better role model for those children. And I think a lot of times we don't think about how important it is for us to model for younger people as women what it means to be a good steward over the body that God has given you, to be a good steward over your mind, and that there are consequences when we don't do that. And the kids experience it too, because there are moms out there and they are on that resentful path because they're tired, because they feel like they're doing it all by themselves. Sometimes that means you have to ask for some help. Sometimes that may mean that you have to be willing to allow your children to help as they get older. And although they may not do things as well as you do, that means you have to kind of let go and say, you know what, maybe they don't fold the towels as well as I do, but I'm going to let go of some of those things so that I have that quality time with my kids.
When I heard some of the mothers say this, I think so much, and you mentioned this before, Valorie, their definition of being great at what they did was other people's perceptions. Well, other people see me as a good parent, and I've got to do all these things to show I am. But you're sort of saying, taking the time to even write that vision, so you're being true to what your value system is, and it may not fit someone else's definition. All the running to this event, taking your kids to all these things.
I think that women in particular are under so much pressure to live up to cultural expectations that sometimes we don't even step back and say, what is God telling me that I need to be doing based on who I am, based on the responsibilities that are placed in my path? And that means that and again, this goes back to fear. You can't be so afraid of what other people think that you don't stay in your lane doing the things you need to do. And that means sometimes people are going to be disappointed. But you have to know who you are and what your mission is and what your divine assignment is at this point in your life. And you have to be willing to stick with that. Now, just on a practical level, I think sometimes women can get so busy that they're not even focused on the little things they can do. I've coached moms who, tell me they don't have time to eat breakfast. And I say, well, your child eats breakfast, right? Well, of course I feed my child. Well, do you not have time to sit down and maybe even just have a bowl of cereal with your kid? 5-10 minutes in the morning. And it's interesting to me that when the mothers do that, they come back, next coaching session, and they're telling me, my child asked me, can we do this every day? Are you going to eat with me every day? Sometimes it's just those little things. And when you think about, go back to your childhood and think about the little things that your mom or dad did with you, those make a big difference. So we have to find ways to do what I call double dipping. We have to find ways to do things that really matter and kind of double up. So, sitting down and eating with others is one of those ways that we can slow down and reconnect with the people who matter.
You've mentioned several times, Valorie, the need to have a clear vision and to know your purpose. Give women some action steps, and maybe you can share from your own experience. Mm-hmm. How did you know your vision and your purpose? How did that clarity come for you?
Well, for me, I literally had an epiphany after a lot of prayer. A couple of years of just really going, what am I here for? I was doing work that I was good at but not passionate about. And I had an epiphany while I was standing in a bookstore. Now, everybody doesn't have a quote-unquote epiphany, a moment like that, where they feel like God is speaking to them. But for a lot of people, they've known their whole lives. They've been doing whatever that thing is they're meant to be doing their whole lives. And your purpose is really simple. It's a statement that describes how someone's life is better when they cross your path. So it may be that you're the one that you bring joy to people. You're the one that lightens up a mood. You bring humor to a situation. You mediate conflict. You're a teacher. Whatever the case might be, it's something that builds on your strengths and what comes naturally to you. And for some people, it's based in their experiences. Something they've gone through that maybe they don't want to see others go through, or something they've experienced that they'd like to see other people experience. But it's always about you serving. It's always about you making a difference. And it always applies not only to your work, but to your personal life as well. My purpose is inspiring women in particular to live fulfilling lives. And the vision is that I do that through writing and speaking.
So you had been praying and asking the Lord specifically, reveal to me your purpose for me.
Yes.
Reveal to me your purpose.
Yes, because your purpose is a compass. It helps you understand what you should be doing and what you absolutely should not be doing. And so when you have decisions to make, if you're clear about why you're here, you can also be clear about why you're not here. Because I think one of the reasons people get busy is there are so many opportunities coming at us. And we end up living by accident. Whatever crosses your path, you say, oh yeah, I'll try that. And your life becomes so full that you don't have time for the stuff.
You get
that
off
really
track.
matters. That's right. Easily off track.
You are listening to Excellent Living with Cheryl Martin, a weekly program inspiring you to achieve authentic success. You can learn more about this broadcast when you visit excellentliving.org. That's excellentliving.org. While on the homepage, you can sign up for our free quarterly online newsletter. Today, Cheryl is talking with Valorie Burton, a personal life coach and the author of several books including What's Really Holding You Back and How Did I Get So Busy? Let's return to their conversation. Here's Cheryl.
Let's talk about some of the things that cause us to get off track. And the great thing about your book, it's a 28-day plan to free your time, reclaim your schedule, and reconnect with what matters most. And in your book, you mention one of the problems, and you mentioned this also at the very beginning, is our inability to tame the technology. Yes. And that there is a great thing that we need to do is to focus on the perils that we face with the technology that's supposed to help us, but in many times hinder us. For example, email.
Yes. And we've all done it where I have a quick email to send. We go to the computer, we sit down. Oh, there's all kinds of other emails, and we open those up, and then there's a link, and we click on the link. Before we know it, 30, 40 minutes have gone by. We shut down our email, and we go, oh yeah, I meant to send Cheryl that email. So, there are so many good things about the technology that I think a lot of times we are not intentional about making sure that we use it to gain time and not consume it. That means you have to practice discipline. That means that perhaps you decide there are certain times of day that you check your email. That may mean I have a client that, one of the things we figured out for her, it's been over a year now and it's been working well. She said, my email just, I constantly have questions. It's so hard to keep up. I said, well, do you check it at certain times? She said, no, I check it whenever, I get new messages. So she decided she would check twice a day. She checks at 8 o'clock when she gets in, and she checks at 4 o'clock, and then she responds, and she has an automated responder that simply says, I check my email 2 times a day. If this is urgent, call me. Because for her, phone calls are much easier for her to deal with. So what we have to do is teach other people how best to communicate with us, as opposed to allowing the technology to drive us. That scenario may not work for one person, but there's something else you can come up with that makes sense for you. And to be comfortable with that, I think, is absolutely essential, as opposed to just, going in the direction of the technology.
I agree with you. So many of us allow the technology to dictate to us. We see that we've got a new email. Mm-hmm. Oh, I need to read that and respond.
Yeah.
And it eats up so many minutes of your day.
Yeah. And some of it really is about that need for connection. Cheryl, we are so disconnected. When I said 55% said they had not had a friend in their home, that means they haven't been talking face to face with people that they say they're close with.
What is your response? I heard a statistic the other day that this generation of teenagers communicate more by text
yes.
than talking.
Yes. As a matter of fact, I was listening to an interview recently, and they were talking specifically about, teenagers that are dating. And some of them hardly ever talking on the phone and only communicating by text, which of course isn't even usually full sentences. It's just really, really quick. We have to recognize what that does for us in terms of how we connect. Connection is essential. Having strong relationships causes us to be happier. And if we just look over time, this issue of busyness, I believe it's an epidemic. If we go back just 40 or 50 years, we realize that people were far more connected in their relationships. The rates of severe depression today are 10 times what they were in the 1960s, even though our incomes have doubled. So, a lot of times as Americans, it's like we think we know what makes us happy, but in too many instances, we're doing the opposite of what causes us to be happy and fulfilled.
What about people who would say, but look, I need to be up. I need to always have my BlackBerry on. I need to have these things to be up on my game. My job demands it. I need to just always get the latest toys of technology in order just to be in tune with technology and advancements.
I think that's fine, but you still have to have rules to take care of yourself. That means sometimes it's got to be turned off. That means that when you get home, that there's some time for you and for your family. There was an article in the Wall Street Journal, and they were referring to some kids as BlackBerry orphans because the kids felt like they were competing with the BlackBerry for their parents' attention. So what I'm saying is there's got to be some boundaries. It can't be all about technology while you are not investing in your relationships, while you're not taking that time for yourself, when you don't have a spiritual life. So I do think a lot of the technology is about us trying to reach out and feel connected. The the reason we feel so compelled to go check that email is because we feel like, oh, somebody's communicating with me. And we don't realize that's what's compelling us to constantly be out there checking the messages.
Excited that someone checked in.
That's right.
Now, what about those who will tend to spend more time, let's say, on the phone, rather than their issue is not email, but chatter on the phone?
Well, again, I think that this is about being fruitful and productive. And if those phone conversations are fruitful and productive, and that's what helps you to get your work done, that's what helps you to reconnect, then that is a good thing. I am definitely not saying that technology is bad. What I am saying is that we have to make sure that we're using it in a way that allows us to reconnect with the things that matter most and allows us to be productive as opposed to just busy.
You also encourage, Valorie, taming your to-do list.
Yes.
Talk about that.
I don't know about you, Cheryl. I've definitely had to-do lists where, each and every day it never gets checked off. I'm lucky if half of the things get checked off. I think we have to, number one, make sure that we have to-dos that are doable in a day or in a week, whatever that time frame that the to-do list is for. I think sometimes we put everything on there, even things that maybe don't need to be done for a few weeks, and we become overwhelmed. So we have to be realistic about our to-dos, and one of the most important things we can do is to put the amount of time each to-do is going to take. What ends up happening then is when you add that up, you have your nice little to-do list. You've got 12 items today. If you actually put how much time each item is going to take, including travel time, including conversations that have to happen, I have found, and this is something I have my coaching clients go through, that a lot of times we have far more stuff on the list than we actually can do in a day when you actually put the time next to it. So that's a great way to make sure your to-do list is realistic, is to actually say, you know what, that doesn't really take 15 minutes. That actually takes an hour. When you do that 12 times and you've got, an 8-hour day and you realize you've got 12 hours worth of to-dos, you're setting yourself up for disappointment. So you've got to be realistic.
And I think what dovetails nicely with that is your great chapter on breaking the procrastination habit.
Yes.
Putting things off for another day. And you said there's only one way to overcome procrastination, and it is, drum roll.
That's right. You've got to just get down to business. I think so often that we think about what we have to do. We strategize it. We plan it. We talk about it. But do we ever actually get down to business? That's it. Now, doing it. Now, what that requires is, and I call myself a recovering procrastinator because it's something that I found I use procrastination as a way to push myself to that very last moment. And then the adrenaline would kick in and I would get a rush and I would get it done. And I think a lot of people can relate to that. But you have to practice the power of a pause. When you feel yourself procrastinating, one of the things that I found is, do it in 5-minute increments. Take a deep breath, refocus. What's the one thing I could just start on? And I do things in 5-minute increments. Usually it doesn't end up just being 5 minutes. Once you're into it, you become engaged in whatever it is you have to do. You begin moving forward, but you have to get started.
I love what you said, though. Stop making it a big deal.
Yes.
I think sometimes the task can be bigger in our minds
Much bigger
than it actually is.
That's
and that
right.
You probably could have gotten it done.
That's right.
For all the time thinking about it.
That's right. I think that we make things a really big deal so we never get started because it feels overwhelming. I think it's important that we just break it into smaller pieces. I think the other issue with procrastination, which causes us oftentimes to feel busier than we actually are because we've pushed things off. But I think one of the other things that we have to make sure that we do is that we're not perfectionists about it. A lot of people procrastinate because they're waiting for the perfect moment. They're waiting to make sure they do it in the perfect way. And if you're willing to do what's called satisficing, you've got a minimum standard, you meet that minimum standard, and it's a high enough standard that you're happy with it, then you're able to get things done. But when everything has to be perfect, of course you keep waiting.
Yeah. I remember when I was a reporter and you had a deadline, it was more important to get the package, the report on the air,
right,
than I'm waiting for it to be perfect. No, they need that minute 45. Even if it's not perfect,
they need it
you
now.
Get a big F if it wasn't perfect, so I didn't get it on the air. It's
right.
more important to meet the deadline. I thought this was such a powerful concept in your book about ask for what you want. And that was the advice you gave one of your clients using the name of Diana.
Mm-hmm. I think that too often we're not fruitful because we're trying to do everything ourselves. We're also not fruitful because we're afraid to ask. We're afraid of rejection. We're afraid someone's going to say, well, who do you think you are to ask for all of that? But in order to be fulfilled, in order to be productive, usually we need to ask people to give, because I think sometimes, particularly in work situations and in our current economy, people tend to be doing a lot more work than they used to do. In Diana's case, she was basically doing 3 people's jobs. They weren't paying her anymore to do the 3 people's jobs. The expectations had not lowered, but she kept working to those expectations. And what she needed to do is, number one, she needed to ask for more money to be compensated for all of the extra work. But she also needed to say, you know what? I can't keep doing all of the things that I'm doing. You all know this isn't fair. And no one else is expected to live up to these expectations. So I think sometimes we are constantly running, trying to live up to people's expectations, and people will push your boundaries until you push back. They will take as much as they can from you until you say, you know what? This is all I'm able to give. And most of the time, the other side knows that they're asking for too much. And when you just call them on the carpet on it, they're willing to be reasonable. Not every single time, but you have to at least ask, what's the worst thing that's going to happen? You'll continue on the path that you're on?
I love the way you said it. You said when you stand up for yourself, adjustments will happen. Be willing to accept consequences and not change your criteria. This is why you have criteria by which you live, love, and work. Your criteria reminds you of your vision and all that you stand for.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. And a lot of us don't have any criteria. Our criteria is what other people hand to us. So this is about knowing what values and principles you live by, what you are willing to accept and what you're not willing to accept. That means sometimes there are consequences for you living by those principles, but it also means that you know who you are and you're living a life that reflects that.
Thanks so much, Valorie, for giving us some concrete steps for reclaiming our time and reconnecting with what matters most. Our guest today, personal life coach Valorie Burton. She's the author of several books, including Get Unstuck, Be Unstoppable, and Successful Women Think Differently. To find out more about Valorie and to order her resources, visit ValorieBurton.com. That's ValorieBurton.com. You're listening to Excellent Living with Cheryl Martin. Our home on the web is excellentliving.org. That's excellentliving.org. Keep in mind this program is listener-supported. When you send your tax-deductible donations, it's your way of letting us know you believe in what we're doing and you'd like us to continue. Send to Excellent Living, Post Office Box 15285, Chevy Chase, Maryland 20825. That's P.O. Box 15285, Chevy Chase, Maryland 20825. Next time, relationship coach Johnny Parker joins us for his monthly visit. In the meantime, you can become our fan on Facebook and follow us on Twitter. Remember, excellent living is doing life God's way.
Are you ready to focus on being who God created you to be, to stop all the comparing and competing? Hi, I'm Cheryl Martin, and in my new book, Distinctly You, I empower you to free yourself from these mental chains and thrive in your own uniqueness. I unveil the attitudes and actions that both block and build your distinction. So get your copy on Amazon.com today or wherever books are sold. It's time to be distinctly you.